This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
You don't like the...
Welcome to episode 111. That seems so cool to say that we're in the hundreds. Anyway, this show is brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. We're also associated with Batman on Films podcast network at BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. So between the BatmanUniverse.net and BatmanPodcastNetwork.com, you can get a hold of us and many other shows. Speaking of getting a hold of us, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We're on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. We are on Instagram, and you can email into the show at robineltdpodcast@yahoo.com. Like I said, I'm Rob, and I feel spoiled. I have both Terence and Ryan on this show again, so I don't want to say we're setting a precedent, but it's kind of cool to have you guys back again, both for this show, and we're wrapping up Contagion. I found a way to only do this in 3 episodes instead of 93 episodes. So Terence, how are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing good, and don't forget to tell the good people they can also buy T-shirts from us too. And where's that? Which T-shirt is over on? I should know that. We sold like 2 of them to Rob already, but
that's right. TeePublic, yeah.
TeePublic, yeah, I got it right. Woohoo!
So
yeah.
TeePublic's really weird. Like, you can type in Robin Everyone Loves a Drake, and I was kind of doing that on my own, and it takes a while to search. The easiest way, and I have another design that I'm going to try and upload. I didn't like it the first time, so I'm going to try it again. So hopefully there'll be 2 now. But the easiest way is to go to our Twitter page, and it's the pinned post up there. You can navigate through TeePublic by searching Robin Everyone Loves the Drake, and you can find our store. But the link is on Twitter if you want to check there. And speaking of Twitter, the Twitter master himself, Ryan Haas, is here. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good.
Hey,
yeah, I'm good.
With everything going on, we'll just take good. Some days good is all anybody.
Yeah, here's my
required.
You know how you got both of us on another episode is because we're still in a pandemic. So.
That's right. That's the only reason, Rob. Don't get used to it. Don't get.
We're able to do Contagion in 3 episodes, but the real life pandemic is going to take a lot longer than that to get rid of.
Oh my gosh! And that's before we get into our final coverage today. Have you guys had this, like, surreal's the wrong word, like reading these books now just by total fluke of, the different side shows that we've done, and it's taken so long to get, to do these other things, that we happen to be covering this book right now as, a real life pandemic is, and kind of reading through some stuff over the last couple days. getting ready for the show, I'm just looking at my wife going, it's just really weird to be reading this stuff and hearing characters say things like, oh, I heard the governor of Ohio say something very similar to this. They're not talking about social distancing, but just how a virus can spread and things like that. So did you guys have any just, I guess heebie-jeebies is the only word I could describe it, to go like, in 96 when this came out, I didn't think much of it, but now going, wow, this is... Yeah. Dixon may have been poo-pooing it, but I think they were kind of ahead of their times.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where you read it back in the day and it's like, well, how could Batman ever fight a virus? And this is kind of a weird story, but now, like, the time we're living in, it's really kind of a art imitating life kind of thing before it even, was relevant to us and our lives the way that we're experiencing it right now. And, other stories like that and Dark Knight Rises, too, like some of the things in that movie, I think are applicable to what's going on right now, too. And it is really weird to be like, well, those things came out a while ago, and now they seem like, back when those things came out, it's like, oh, it's just a story. But now it's kind of some real-life parallels going on, and it is really weird. But that's kind of what stories do for us, is give us a window to kind of work it out, in a different format.
Yeah.
I was thinking today, too, like, it's such a coincidence that we're doing Contagion at this time. And I'm like, when we get to Cataclysm, I'm not traveling to California. Like, evacuate California when our podcast hits that. It's just too much of a coincidence. And it was weird because I was listening to the podcast today. I was listening to you guys, I forget which episode. Insert the episode here, Rob, for Contagion Part 1. And I was driving to go to the store, and then I get to the store, and there's all these people in masks and wearing gloves, and they only let so many in, and they're doing all these social distancing, and they got plexiglass around the thing, and I'm like, and then I get back in the car and listening to Batman fighting the virus. But I learned something new. All right, so first of all, Rob, congratulations on the intro. I love the intro. It sounds great now. Rob does all the editing and everything. Rob does all the heavy lifting on this podcast. He does all the work. And the intro sounds great, and we've got, like, some creators. It sounds kind of official and stuff. But George Perez, right? Yeah. He always says everybody... Does he say like everybody likes...
Especially the cakes.
That's it. Okay, so for years... forever, where did you get... First of all, let me ask this. Where did you get that soundbite, and when did you start using it? Because I want to get how long I've been listening to that soundbite.
Cincinnati Comic Expo. Jeez. So we've done this show 5 years. I've probably had that soundbite for 4 years, but it hasn't been in an intro. Like, every now and then I would just set it in, because I got he and Marv Wolfman both at the same time. They were sharing desks, and they both had set it for me.
They
so
both
I just was,
got it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I was just using them both as just like maybe as quote unquote coming back from a promo or a synopsis. I would just throw it in there. So for the 100th, I thought I had to just add that in. Anytime we get somebody, get them to record a little blurb for us.
Did you get to tell Marv Wolfman that A Lonely Place of Dying is like your favorite story? I
did. I'll get to Terence in just a sec. I told Marv Wolfman, I'm like, I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but I said, The Lonely Place of Living for me is my Dark Knight Returns for Robin. And he just looked at me and said, I have never heard that before, but that's exactly what I was thinking as I was writing it. And I was like, wow. Are you kidding me? He's like, everybody has The Dark Knight Returns as their Bible for Batman. This is why I love Batman. This is why Batman's important. He was like, that was on my mind of like, I want to be able to give something to Robin fans out there that states this is why Robin's important. So that just kind of validated everything. So that's why I'm actually stealing that from him. Like, that's why I feel that way. So. But yeah, so I've had that sound bite for four and a half, almost 5 years now, and have been using the soundbite almost for a year in the intro. So there you go, Terence.
All right, so for about a year, I've been hearing that, and I thought he said, everybody loves the Drake, especially the Kinks. You know, the band from the 60s, the Kinks? And every time I hear it, I'm like, God. What is he talking? And I'm like, did the Kinks have a song about Drake or Drakes or something? And then I always think, I got to look that up. And then, of course, I completely forget until the next time the podcast comes on. And I hear, and everybody loves the Drake, especially the Kinks. And I'm like, the Kinks? What is that? I got to look that. And I forget. And then today, I guess because it was in my car or something, I heard him say, and then I heard it that it was the Cakes. And I'm like, Oh, the cakes. Okay, so I don't know. I've got problems. But
And we've talked about Drake cakes on the show before too, I think.
Yeah. And I didn't think the Drake cakes were a real thing. I thought, like you'll see stuff on.
Though. It's regional, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we just started getting them in Ohio. It's probably been a couple years now, and I think I even tweeted Drake's Cakes and about being a sponsor, and I hadn't heard anything back. I got all excited for like a couple months, and my wife's like, "Let it go, Rob. Seriously." But I thought that was just a made-up, fictitious. Like if you watch like the Cosby Show, they're holding a Coke can. It just says cola. Like, you can clearly tell it's a Coke can, but they don't have sponsorship to have Coke or whatever show you're watching. So seeing that on Seinfeld, I thought, Drake's Cakes aren't a real thing because I don't see them in any stores around here. So it wasn't until a few years later that I realized, it's a real, actual thing. So I knew it at the time that he said it, that it was real. And I was like, yeah, especially the Drakes, or especially the cakes. I'm like, yeah, for you, George, you probably live in a place where you get those things. So it wasn't until like 2 years ago that I had an actual real Drake's cake, and I'm like, these are amazing.
Yeah, it's so weird. Seinfeld was that first show that actually used real products. Because before that, it was all fake stuff. And then after Seinfeld, the networks cracked down on that, and they said, well, we're not giving out free advertising anymore. You're not allowed to do that. So it's just this like sweet spot of the 90s where you could actually hear real things like Ovaltine and Drake's Cakes and stuff, yeah.
And like Jerry was constantly having different cereal boxes every time you see Captain Crunch.
Well, they have like whole, like they have episodes based around like Junior Mints and
and
Pez
Bosco.
dispensers.
Yeah.
Bosco. We can reminisce about
Kenny Rogers Roasters.
Kenny Rogers. Oh, I love that episode. I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
We can pontificate all night long about I'm going to get hungry if we just keep talking about food and things like that, about the sponsors that we don't have on the show, but that's all right. I don't have to pay for it. But we're going to be talking about the final few books for Contagion, and that is Batman Chronicles number 4. And we're going to skip Catwoman, but the synopsis will appear in the episode. But Azrael 16 and then Robin 28. So what we're going to do really quick is we'll take a promo break on the other side for our final part of Contagion. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. Go get yourself a Drake's cake, and we'll be right back.
I hope he's home. Why does it sound like I'm using a phone in the UK?
I told you never to call me again.
Yeah, I know. And modern science has yet to create a device to measure how much I don't care. Look, I'm getting the trailer for this year's JLMA together, and I assumed I had to make you a part of it since you're always in everybody's trailer or something.
Well, look at you, leading this year's JLMA. Somebody's wearing his big boy pants. So, what's the theme?
I sent you an email like a month ago.
Like I even pay attention to anything you send me.
Countdown to Infinite Crisis.
Infinite Crisis?
No, Countdown to Infinite Crisis.
I'm not following.
Shocking. The theme this year, I'm going to, like I'm talking to a child. The theme this year is Countdown to Infinite Crisis. I thought it was a fascinating time period in DC's history, so a bunch of us are getting together to talk about the various specials and miniseries and crossovers that led up to Infinite Crisis. It's the event before the event. The whole thing is going to kick off on April 30th, 2020 with a special episode of Views from the Long Box covering the Countdown to Infinite Crisis 80-page giant, and from there a whole bunch of shows that I will be adding in post-production will discuss these previously mentioned miniseries and crossover issues.
And people actually agreed to this?
Shockingly, yes.
Well, it's probably a good thing that you're going to cover Countdown to Infinite Crisis instead of the Countdown series, because that was a train wreck.
Yeah, actually that was my thinking too. Now, are you going to help me with this trailer or not?
Fine, I will help you with your little trailer.
Good. Don't worry, by the way. There won't be any dates for you to get wrong.
I hate you so much.
JL May 2020. Countdown to Infinite Crisis. The event before the event. This crossover kicks off on April 30th, 2020 on Views from the Long Box, and continues into Aquaman and Firestorm, the Fire and Water podcast, Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake, Pop Culture Affidavit, It All Comes Back to Superman, the Fanholes podcast, Justice's First Dawn, the Birds of Prey podcast, Married with Comics, the Coffee and Comics podcast, the Longbox Crusade, Task Force X, Relatively Geeky Presents, Wonder Woman, Warrior for Peace, and the Dr. DC podcast.
Weird because every time we come back from a promo break, there is no promo, add it later, and then I count really awkwardly to Terence and Ryan to let them know, hey, we're going to start again. So maybe I'll just leave it in one of these times. So Batman Chronicles number 4. This was one of the few books that I had bought off of the stand because Batman was holding Tim Drake on the front cover here. I thought, oh, wow, what's going to happen? Is this the issue where Robin dies? But I was missing a few issues here and there, and had it day that I bought it. I think I flipped through it and maybe I read it, but boning up for this show, nothing was clicking. Like I was reading it for the very first time. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Terence and he's going to take us through Batman Chronicles. But I just wanted to ask, I probably know Ryan's answer, but Terence, did you read this when it had come out? And like me, you just checked it off into Never Never Land?
Yeah, so I bought all the Contagions when it came out. I was collecting everything at that point, and so I had to pull out all the floppies. And again, like you guys said on the first part 1, if you ask me what happened in Contagion, I probably couldn't tell you. And as I reread it, I was kind of like, I don't really remember this. But as I read it, I could also see it doesn't have a lot of I don't even know what the word is. Repeat reading, I guess. I was going to say rereading. I don't think too many re's. Because, like, the Catwoman issue that we're skipping is just completely nothing. Like, it's just a dead-end trail. So it's hard to, like, read something again where you know, like, oh, yeah, here's 3 issues that lead to absolutely nothing. Because it turns out you can't cure the virus from the blood of a survivor. So all those issues where they were searching for the survivors really amounts to kind of nothing in the story. This cover is interesting because in the floppies, in the little triangle in the top right corner, on this it's just blank. And you guys are reading... It's
like in Nightfall when like they had the Shadow of the Bat Scarecrow issues where they're just like, hey, these are like part of Nightfall but not necessary, so they didn't put a number on it.
And
it's,
Showcase.
it's kind of like
They
the
did
same thing. Yeah.
Showcase
Actually, I
too,
think
right?
didn't the
Yeah.
Showcase ones have numbers?
Oh, did they have numbers? Okay.
Yeah, I think the Two-Face ones, don't quote me on it, I'm going to stab in the dark. I think they're either 11 and 12 or they're 12 and 13. It's something like that.
Well, I wanted to ask you, where does this fall in the trade paperback? I think they left it out of one edition, and then did they number it in the other editions, or?
The newest one that I have that I've been reading this out of, this takes place right after this as Detective Comics. I'm flipping hurriedly.
696?
696, yeah. So the last one, I think you and I did, Terence. This takes place right after that, where Tim is in his bed and it says to be continued. Then Batman Chronicles starts, and it's just the triangle with the eye, and there's nothing in it. So
It's the Deathly Hallows symbol.
Yes.
Without the wand.
Yeah. Which actually will turn out to be the virus. That's what the virus looks like.
Right.
Which is kind of weird. We'll get to that later. But the cover, I like this cover. It kind of reminded me of Death in the Family, but like the reverse side of it. Like the back of Death of the Family. And I didn't see where inside it said who did the cover, but on the art it says Bellent and Jones. And Bellent was doing the Catwoman, but it really looks like Jones's art. So I was kind of wondering
isn't
who
like
did
Kelly
what.
Kelly Jones did the border of everything?
I think so.
Bellent did the main.
But if you look at like Robin's hair in this and the cape and everything, that looks very Kelly Jones. So I was maybe Bellent was trying to maybe
they
mimic
both
his
did
style.
it.
But
like
yeah,
they're both of their signatures are on the cover too.
yeah,
right?
just because they both have very unique styles. That's why it was kind of interesting. But I guess I'll throw it to you guys here. Ryan, what did you think of the cover?
I love the cover. I mean, it made me think of the Robin Dies at Dawn stuff. But like you said, from the opposite side, I think it's definitely trying to evoke that, trying to get you to be like, oh no, is he going to, like Rob said, like is he going to die this issue? And I did not read this issue when it came out, but as a kid, I really thought the Batman Chronicles was a cool title. Just because it only came out like 4 times a year or something. So whenever I would see it, I'll be like, oh, this must be important, because you don't see it that often. Because the one I remember the most, I think I have the first issue sticks out to me, and I don't remember which number it is, but there was one of these that came out right around Batman and Robin, and the cover art had like a really cool, like realistic, Batman, Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy kind of cover, and it came out right around the same time the movie did. So I remember getting that issue also.
Yeah, the issue right before this, Batman Chronicles number 3, has a really cool Mr. Zsasz origin story, which I don't know if they've retconned since New 52 or Rebirth or anything like that, but it's told by Alan Grant, who created him, and it's got, I think it's a Brian Boland cover, or if not, it is Brian Boland. I see it right here. When I pulled out 4, I was like, ooh, look at 3. This is kind of cool. And it's got a cool Chuck Dixon Killer Croc story. But Rob, what'd you think of the cover?
I like it, and I was trying to find it on Mike's Amazing World, and it's kind of hard to sift through that, but for DC Fandom, it does list Jim Ballent, Kelly Jones as the cover artist on there, so I kind of like leaning towards what Ryan said. I think the borders are probably Kelly Jones, and then the interior, the middle of the cover is probably Ballent's work. This was just a striking cover in and of itself, and I believe this is the Babylon Towers that's probably collapsed and dilapidated, but just seeing all the smoke and the red moon, or probably the moon rather than the sunrise. There's just a really like ominous cover. Like this is where insert Kevin Hart sound where he would say it's about to go down, or something like that. Yeah, I dig this cover, and it was one that instantly caught my eye where I thought, oh, I gotta pick this up, and then apparently quickly forget it after I read it. I don't know.
Yeah. Now the issue has got 3 stories in it, and the first story is called Hitman, which is written by Garth Ennis and John McCrea, who I believe were the writer and artists of that series that was going on, which I think was somewhat popular, although I never read it. And it's a 19-page story, not including the 18-page story, not including ads. So 18 pages of material, that's almost a full issue. But when I picked it up today to reread it, I was like, I hope this isn't just like 18 pages of a commercial of let's make Hitman look cool, so this way you'll want to read the Hitman book, and he's kind of cool at sort of Batman's expense a little bit. So look how cool he is. He got the best of Batman. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. It was not much of anything. So did either of you guys read the Hitman story, or did you want to just move on to the next one?
I took a glancing pass at it, and it's everything that you said it was. Like, it's stories like this that I go, with it being a Batman book and a primarily Batman-focused book, that you are making the lead character take the back seat to another character so you can go, ha, I got the one hand up on you type thing. So I feel this is completely unnecessary. This is like, we have all this other stuff going on, but what's over here? Maybe we'll just put Batman over and this side. It really has nothing to do with anything. This is an addendum to the story. So it's easily forgettable, not necessarily necessary. So I think that's about all I have for it.
Yeah. How about you, Ryan?
I just read the Robin story.
It's a smart move, yeah.
I just flipped through it and I saw Batman has a gun in his mouth, and I was like,
yeah,
skip it.
Yeah, it's really dumb too. Like, he ends up like biting the gun and pulling it out of the guy's hand with his mouth, and I'm like,
yeah, it's weird.
I know it's not real and it's make believe, but come on, you'd get your face shot off here. So come on. The second story, I was going to skip that because it was the Huntress story, but I saw it was written by Christopher Priest. And I really like his writing. I loved his Deathstroke run on Rebirth, which came to an end with issue 50. So I read it today, and it's not that bad. It's okay. It's not the greatest. But what I liked is it tied it into some previous Batman stories. So if you remember in the first part of Contagion, the virus got to Gotham City because some guy was flying in a private plane from Africa. And then you saw the pilot come home, and he's talking to his kids about, I flew some guy into Babylon Towers, and then the pilot starts coughing blood, and they're dead. Well, it turns out that the kid of the pilot, the son of the pilot, was a student in Helena Bertinelli's class, because at this point she's a teacher by day and huntress by night. So she's out basically going through Gotham looking for the kid because both parents are dead, he's missing. There's some weird clunky stuff, like in the beginning Batman tells her, like, don't do this, we've got bigger things to worry about, and she's like, forget you, Batman. So she breaks into her own school, into her own classroom, and then like gets like a Rolodex and just starts like calling all the parents, hey, have you seen little Bobby anywhere? Or Eric, his name is. It's like, it's kind of weird. Then she ends up, spoilers, finding the kid, and he's hiding in a helicopter because she knew his dad loved to fly, but he's infected with the virus and looks like he's going to die. And then Batman shows up right at the end and be like, see, I told you so. We got more important things. So it wasn't that bad. I kind of liked how they tied it in with the pilot and everything, and it wasn't just some random story. How about you, Rob? Did you read this one?
Yeah, I did read this one because this is one I kind of remembered going, I think this does fit better narratively, and you're right with it being a pilot and everything. And I think I can't remember which episode it was I said that I feel like constantly we have to be reminded, remember, Batman doesn't like the Huntress, and you are kind of reminded that, especially at the end of the story, and Batman says at one point, like, I'm sorry, but she has the little thought balloon. And she says, like, I should have expected this. Should have expected, this would be Batman's, reaction to everything. So, again, didn't win any awards for me, but I do like Priest as well. So I thought this fit a lot better than maybe some of the other, stories might have in the book.
Ryan?
I just read the Robin story.
Yeah. So let's get to that, which I kind of feel like if you looked up the word filler in the dictionary, you might find this story. Mm-hmm. I was kind of wondering about it. So spoilers here for the whole thing. It's about 10 pages, written by Chuck Dixon, and it's basically Tim's in the Batcave in really, really bad shape from the clench from Ebola Gulf A virus. And he kind of wakes up, and his dad's there, and Tim's all better, and everything's okay, and his dad's like, hey, I knew you were I knew you were Robin. Everything's cool, though. I know all about it. We're all great. Come on upstairs. And they see Bruce, and Bruce is having some coffee, just lounging in the kitchen, like, hey, so great, you're back. And then he sees Ari and Ariana, and she knows he's Robin, but she's cool with it, and everybody's all happy. And then they go to his house and find his mom is still alive, and she's been cooking, and he's so happy, and he gives his parents a hug. And then the last page, you see it's just all like a fever dream from the virus. And I was wondering, because in the soundbite you played, Rob, for the first episode, which you never said in the episode that was Chuck Dixon's voice, so I wonder if anyone was like, who's that guy?
I probably should have. And I snuck in Justin Kowalski in there, since he's the one that actually asked the question, but anyway.
Yeah, and then I think in the episode you're like, yeah, one of the writers said it, like, Rob's being real coy with this here. But Chuck Dixon says that he was writing 3 books at a time, and that he had to get done so the other writers could do their scripts, and that he checked himself into a hotel for 3 days and just spent a day. So I wondered, like, one, where did you have time to write another 10-page story? But I also wondered if this was maybe an idea or something he was thinking of doing in the Robin book or in one of the books, and then just couldn't quite fit it in, but then used the Chronicles to, like, kind of maybe flush it out and expand it a little bit. Or if this was just like, oh, I got to fill 10 pages. What could I do? Aha, dreams. That's like, oh, that just was like my least favorite thing in comics. So I was wondering about that. But Ryan, since we know you love the other 2 stories so much, what'd you think of the third story? Yeah.
I thought when I read this, I was like, you know what? This is the kind of story that they totally could have put in the Robin 80th. Anniversary issue, because it's like it's this thing that expands an existing story that isn't necessary. It's short, and it could be like, hey, this could have happened. Like, this is an extra thing that you didn't know about that could have happened. So, like, it's one of those things where you can take this out of Contagion completely, and you wouldn't know or notice. But just the fact that it gets added in there, it's like, okay, well, it just kind of adds a little bit of extra texture to it, as unnecessary as it is. I mean, but it is kind of, to me, it's kind of a cool thing to see some of the what if stuff get addressed early, to see like what Tim's reaction would be, knowing full well that it's not, gonna happen, or it's not gonna happen the way that it happens in this.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder too if maybe they put this in to bridge the gap for Robin readers, because Robin 28 opens up with this sort of cliffhanger with the hospital bed and everything. So maybe if they thought people didn't read Azrael but read Robin, it would kind of remind people of Tim's state. Looking at the sales charts, Azrael was actually outselling the Batman Chronicles, and they were pretty close. So I'm assuming a lot of people would just buy everything back then. Rob, what did you think of this? It's called Beggar's Banquet.
I did like this one, just like more of repeating what Ryan just said, but also one of those, like, you've heard stories of people being really sick, or they're having dreams, or they're having like false reality is the wrong thing. They just have these very lucid dreams of things going on. And I think Chuck really captures that essence of Tim probably at his worst and thinking of his family and friends, and if he's going to go out, and because he says to Alfred later on, I think it's in Azrael, if I don't make it through this, and if my dad makes it through, tell him that, I love him, this, that, or the other. So this is one of those things I think that Chuck plays on really well, that these are the thoughts that Tim is having. Like, I would hope that my dad understands that I'm Robin. I would hope that Ari would approve of me, and it'd be great to see my mother one last time. So I liked that. I liked seeing Tim hold on to both of his parents saying, I love you, and seeing the fade and the deet, deet, deet sound, if you will, and realizing that he's back in the cave, and this is, pulling that Dallas moment of like, it was all a dream. This whole entire season was. So, yeah, I liked it for what it is. And like Ryan said, completely unnecessary. It does not change the story. Like all three of these books, I mean, I can understand in other trades why they left them out. Some editor was like, this does nothing. It's going to cost us X number of dollars to print, 27 more pages that we really don't need. But for the completists, people going, there was this Batman Chronicles book that's technically a part of it. So it's cool. This is definitely the best of the three stories that are in here. Even though he was writing 3 books, this doesn't feel phoned in, but this does feel like Ryan said, hey, here's a little extra.
Yeah, and 2 things about it for me. One is that it separates, or it tells us what separates Tim Drake from Dick Grayson and from Jason Todd at this point, and even Damian Wayne coming in the future, even though he wasn't around yet. And that is that Tim has this dynamic that he has a parent still alive, and he has a father, and he's got a father who's not a jerk and not a horrible person and, cares about him. So he's got to kind of do the Robin thing behind his dad's back and kind of sneak out and make excuses and just flat out lie to his father to do the Robin thing. And that's got to torment him. The other thing too is that Tim also has a girlfriend, or on again, off again girlfriend in Ariana, which I don't ever remember like Dick Grayson or Jason Todd, even though I didn't read a lot of that Robin stuff. But that wasn't a dynamic that they had where they had a girlfriend that didn't know about their secret identity, that they had to kind of hide and make excuses for and explain bruises. I think Dick had lots of girlfriends, but they were always like superpowered, like it was, Starfire or something, so it wasn't an issue. So I think the dream sequence does a great job of sort of highlighting that. And also, this is where I get angry. People at DC are a bunch of jerks. Why did you kill Alfred? The whole reason the story works and has emotional weight to it is Alfred's reaction to Tim's distress. Alfred sitting there with his head down, Alfred with tears in his eyes, Alfred vowing that he'll tell his father, and that's what gives this story such weight. And man, okay. So anyway, that was the bad move, DC. All right. So before we close the pages on the Batman Chronicles, Ryan or Rob, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Again, Ryan keeps stealing Ryan's answers because they're always better than mine. This was one of those cool books that came out every now and then that was like four times a year, that it was like
or whatever.
Quarterly. Yeah, this was cool. It was going to be its own thing. Maybe it would be tied into something else. So I really didn't miss a Chronicles issue, maybe one, I think, in my whole collection. I always dug it for what it was. It could be its own thing, or it can be part of something bigger. So I always dug the Chronicles book just for this. This might not have been its best offering. I think I prefer the Chronicles book when it's just doing its own thing, whether they're 3 independent stories of one another. But for the Contagion as a whole to be part of it, just it flushes out the story. If you want to spend a little more time in this world, it does it. It doesn't bring the book up any. I don't think it brings it down. It just maybe makes you flip a couple extra more pages. All right, even though we're not going to cover Catwoman on the show, I at least think narratively it's nice to at least give you the synopsis for the books, just in case there's somebody that's not reading the books along with us and you're just listening to the podcast. At least you can hear all of the beats for it, and you can get the information that way. Speaking of the information, we're going to go to Mike'sAmazingWorld.com to get you the cover credits and the interior credits for this book. Catwoman 32 has a cover date of April 1996 with an on sale date of February 13th, 1996, and the cover price is $1.95, and the editor is Denny O'Neil. The title is Fever Pitch. The writer is Chuck Dixon, the penciler is Dick Giordano, the inker is Robert Allen Smith, the letterer is Albert Tobias D. Gunsman, and the colorist is Buzz Stelzer. This has been reprinted in Batman Contagion trade paperback from 1996, and if my memory serves me correct, I don't have it in front of me, the Contagion trade paperback that I currently have, the newest version, I believe, is 2012-2013. The cover credits for this goes to Jim Ballant. And now the synopsis for Catwoman 32 reads as follow. Fever Pitch. Catwoman is leaving San Francisco to find the last survivor, Lenore Wee, in Miami, Florida. She leaves Tracker tied up in a car's trunk once in Miami. Catwoman goes to the place where Oracle told her the last survivor was. When she arrived at the place to find out what seems like an old drug den, the drug lords killed a man because he wouldn't pay them for the drugs and took the woman to an unknown place. Catwoman was outnumbered and decided to let them go and to follow them. The thugs take Lenore Wee to their boss. The crime lord tells Wee that because her boyfriend refused to pay for the drugs, she was going to have to work the payment off. Before he could say anything else, Catwoman arrives and takes down the three men, leaving only the boss. The crime boss takes Wee as a hostage, and Catwoman tries to talk to the man about the prize money over Wee's blood. He wouldn't listen, and Catwoman is forced to take him down as well. Catwoman and Wee travel back to Gotham City in one of the drug lord's planes. When they arrive in Gotham, Catwoman is disappointed to see Babylon Towers in ruins and everyone is dead that was inside of it. In that moment, Tracker arrives and was planning to take Wee to the Penguin to claim the reward, but he is once again tricked by Catwoman and knocked out. Catwoman goes to the Iceberg Lounge to claim the reward for herself, but when she arrives, she finds the place empty, except for Nightwing and Batman, who tells her that the survivor's blood was useless to create any type of cure, and there's little hope for what is left of Gotham City and its people. All right, so we're moving over. We're going to switch gears to the Azrael podcast. Since we can't hear the Azrael podcast, I'm just going to force the Azrael podcast to happen right now.
Here we go.
So we're going to kick Ryan. It only makes sense if we're going to cover the Azrael book for Ryan to be here to take us through this one. So Azrael 10, the mic is all yours, sir. Go.
So this is part 10 of Contagion, but it's Azrael 16. This one opens and it says that Catwoman is shocked when Batman tells her that it's impossible to develop a cure from Lenore's blood because she was never infected by the virus, therefore her blood didn't have the necessary antibodies to create a cure. She was just naturally immune to it as well as the other two survivors. Batman, Catwoman, and Nightwing feared that there was no hope left for Gotham City. Meanwhile, Alfred watches as Tim's state worsens. Jean-Paul Valley watched on the news that the shape of the virus has been discovered, and he remembered seeing that shape in one of the laboratories in the Order of St. Dumas in Africa. At that moment, in one of the Order's headquarters, Brother Rollo was inquiring Brother Zoo about the events related to the virus, and he confessed that he had spread the virus in Greenland to test it, and when it proved successful, he infected another Order member, Daniel Maris, to take the plague to Gotham City. He also confessed that he was the one who ordered the attack on Kendall Stewart way back at the beginning. Brother Rollo asked him if he took the writings from the African laboratory, but Zoo didn't know anything about that. And when Rollo finished his investigation, he ordered the acolytes to kill Zoo, and they let their hounds have him. With the writings that Azrael takes from Africa, Sister Lily started to translate the text, and then she gives it to Jean-Paul. The translated text was the recipe for the cure to the virus, and Jean-Paul, as Azrael, sets out to deliver the cure to Gotham. When he was near his car, he was attacked by some of the Order of St. Dumas acolytes, and with them was Leha, but he runs away at the sight of Azrael. Azrael takes down the acolytes and races to Gotham. There he eludes the National Guard to get to the city and deliver the cure to the nearest hospital. And then Nightwing takes the cure's recipe to the Batcave to cure Tim, but when he arrives, Alfred tells him that he's already too late.
See, now Terence said really nice things about Alfred, and now he pulls a move like that. Alfred's a jerk. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
In traditional Robin Everyone Loves the Drake fashion, let's talk about the cover. I remember seeing this cover as I collected. This is the first time I've read this issue because I'm trying to go through stuff chronologically. So the Azrael issues I've been reading have been the parts of Contagion. The last one was 15. When they were. When he was with Catwoman and all that nonsense earlier. But yeah, so as I was collecting the issues, I picked this one up. I always thought this one was interesting because I'm like, oh man, Azrael and Robin, what's happening? What's happening? It's not one of my favorite covers, but it is like definitely one of those. It's fun when Azrael is part of a crossover like this because it didn't happen that often, and Contagion is pretty unique because Azrael gets 2 slots in the crossover. So
Yeah, I kind of liked this cover. This was another one of those. This was a book that I didn't buy, but I saw. So this is the first time I read it for the podcast, and seeing the skeleton, presumably be Tim Drake, in the tattered Robin costume, I remember thinking, I know I don't normally read Azrael, but I think I probably flipped through this like, what is going on here? So again, like you said, it's not one of those like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing cover, but thematically, I think it works for the story. It gets its point and message across. Like, there is a dead Robin on the floor, and Jean-Paul looks legitimately, upset by it. So if nothing else, this was one that if I didn't buy it, it made me pull it off the shelf and at least thumb through it.
Actually, for this whole series, Barry Kitson's art is amazing. I love Barry Kitson's art, and there's some stellar work in this issue. But I was a little taken aback by this cover when it first came out, because not knowing the story and everything, it was a little hard for me to tell from Azrael's posture whether he was like lamenting the death of Robin, or if he was like lording over him, like, I just killed Robin, I vanquished him. Like, I couldn't really tell from the body language which way. So there was a little bit when I first got it of like, is Azrael gonna turn on them, or are they implying that Azrael's going to turn on them and he killed Robin? And of course, what's on the cover isn't always what's in the issue, and then after reading it and everything, you can kind of see like, oh, it's he's lamenting here. But I was a big fan of the Azrael series. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do think that Azrael, I think, always worked best, and I liked him best when he was sort of connected to Gotham and the Batman family in some way, shape, or form. Having this cover and the image of those two, it's pretty awesome.
See, I was always kind of on the other side of that. I mean, I liked it when Azrael was off, was with the Bat family, but I think there was always something about Azrael making a name for himself and not having to rely on the Bat family. Like, this character is big enough that, I mean, we've said before, he also sustained 100 issues. And that kind of showed the weight of the character. Like, he was something kind of cool in Nightfall, and we're going to show you why. So I think the few Azrael issues that I have more Azrael issues in my collection without the Bat family than with the Bat family. I think I liked those just a little bit better.
I just wanted to kind of see what your guys' highlights of the issue are. I mean, for me, it's actually a lot of the parts that Azrael isn't in, because I really like seeing Batman interact with Catwoman both at the beginning of the issue and like in the middle when he's talking with Catwoman about like the state of the virus and how she's a criminal or whatever, but it pales in comparison to what's going on in the world and stuff like that. And that's the kind of stuff that makes me think of what we're going through right now in the real world. And it's just fun to read this stuff and remember that, oh, this is Denny O'Neil writing it. I just think that's kind of a cool thing that you're reading, and it makes me think about the current day Batman and Catwoman and how their relationship is different than this version of Batman and Catwoman. They're definitely a little bit more apart and just getting used to interacting with each other, which I think is kind of fun. And I do like Azrael in this issue, and it's fun to see him be all gung-ho and stuff. And, like Terence was saying, that page towards the end where he's fighting people, and then the page where he's driving the car while he's, like, riding on top of the car, I thought that's super cool. I mean, it's really cool images of Azrael. But at the end of the day, as we'll find out in the next issue, like, this whole second half of the story is kind of, like, didn't need to happen. Like, it's one of those things where it's just like, if there was a novelization of Contagion, they would chop out a lot of this, because it's just like, as we'll find out later, like, they didn't need to do half of the action scenes because it just didn't matter. But and then the end, the fake out thing at the end is just pretty ludicrous. But we'll get to that. What kind of highlights did you guys have?
All of Azrael's action scenes, I think, I've always been a big fan of Barry Kitson's art, but like, some of his best stuff is in this issue with Azrael. I'm reading it from the trade. Don't know what the page number is, but like you said, when he's on the car and his cape is kind of billowed out behind him. I think it just looks really cool. You get some really gruesome shots of Tim just bleeding from almost every single orifice. His eyes got nose running out of blood. Blood running out of his nose. Just really gory. And again, like you said, just the dynamic of Catwoman and Batman is completely flipped from what we know now. I think seeing, and maybe you can correct me on this, is this the first time that we've seen Lee Haas since a Nightfall that, he gets to see him at one point and is instantly like, never mind. So I thought that was kind of cool that it makes you go, wow, we haven't seen this character since the end of Nightfall when the helicopter blows.
Yeah, he's in Night's End, but I'm not sure if we've seen him before this because I haven't read the preceding issues. I wouldn't be surprised if we do, just because he just comes kind of out of left field. So I'm not really sure how he fits in. But I kind of wouldn't be surprised if we have seen him earlier.
But like you said, they would probably chop a lot of things off. But at least as far as this book goes, it's Azrael that has figured this out, and his girlfriend or whatever has deciphered the symbols or whatever, and it's Jean-Paul that's delivering the cure to the hospital. It's not like, all right, let me go send this to Batman so Batman can take care of it and Batman gets to be the hero. You're having Azrael walk into the hospital and hand the note to, a doctor, I was about to say an orderly, a nurse or whoever there, says a cure for the plague, where I'm like, wow, they get to have Azrael do that. And again, with Denny writing it, I wonder if that's one of those things where Denny was like, no, I want Azrael to be the one that gets to have this big moment. It's not Catwoman or the Huntress. Oh, I get to be redeemed in Batman's eyes. It's Jean-Paul, which I think is really kind of cool.
Yeah, and it is interesting that they do end up giving Azrael figures out what the cure is and figures out how to get to the cure and all that, and that the Order of Saint Dumas ends up being kind of responsible for the whole thing in the first place. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so this is the what Ryan said podcast, because I'm that's what he said. All right, because the exact same thing, page 8 in the floppies, the very first words out of Batman is he's talking to Catwoman, he says, "We're still enemies." And I was like, aha, somebody take a picture of this and send it to Tom King. Let me see. This is written by Denny O'Neil, okay, people? Not so, but I know different universes and all that stuff. But I think even though Rob disagreed with me there about Azrael working with the Bat family in the book, I think maybe as I'm looking at this, I'll talk to my therapist about this later, but I think as I'm try to work it out, but I think as I'm looking at this, why I like when Azrael interacts with the Bat family so much is because I love the way Barry Kitson draws everyone in the Bat family. So it may be more about the art than the characterization, but his Batman and Catwoman are so great, and like you said, I think his artwork of Tim dealing with the clench is just like, oh man, that's so good. The last couple pages where Azrael's driving the car and then jumps off the bridge, and as I'm reading it, I was kind of like, what is he doing? And I'm like, this is kind of stupid, because why would you have the whole cure in just like one note that you're willing to risk on a moving car that you jump off a bridge to get to, like, you don't even know where you're going with it. And then later on in the other issues, you find out his friends just faxed it to everyone who really
and they
needed
even telegraph it. They're just like, I really need to tell him something. He just kind of bolted out the door, blah blah blah. It's like, we just texted him. Yeah. It's like,
I stole this car for nothing.
Azrael's like, I have to do it the old-fashioned way, and he's just like bolting through.
But I do think it's great to show how with Jean-Paul and Azrael, the programming will just kick in and he'll just react. Like, got the cure, gotta go. Boom, it's the programming. And so from that part of it, I thought that was pretty cool. And then
plus I think some of it is his drive to make amends for the things that he's done in the past too, like where he walks by the guy and he's like, he's like, aren't you the angel of death? He's like, well, this time I'm going to be the angel of life.
Well, and I think that's kind of cool, too, if you were somebody that, read Nightfall and you're like, all right, Azrael's done. You didn't pick up Azrael because you didn't like the character or whatever, and you were just reading the Batman titles, and here's this Contagion story. Well, I got to buy Azrael. This gives that person or somebody to go, oh, well, Azrael's so cool. He's doing this for Batman. He's doing this for Tim. So it's starting to paint Azrael, rather than being this almost murderous Batman that Bruce lets him go in the front yard of Wayne Manor. Like, he probably should have done some time, to go, no, there's a reason why Bruce let him go. And you can kind of see those things, even if issue 16 was the first issue you've read since Night's End, that having that saving moment for Azrael, I think is really cool.
Yeah, and there's two scenes in this arc, one in Azrael, one in Robin, that are creepy as all get out. And one is on page 6, where they released those dogs on that guy, and he's just smiling under the hood. And I'm like, Denny O'Neil, what is wrong with you? Yeah. And then there's another one, we'll get to it in Robin, that, man, if this was a horror movie, I'd just walk out. I'm like, I'm done. I can't take any more. This is just done. With the dogs and everything, and the shadow of the guy, that was very like cinematographic. Like I could see that in a movie. So that was really good.
I dig this. I dig this a lot.
Hey, can I ask you guys a question at this point? Whose idea do you think it was? Now that, well, let me say this. It's kind of funny because when we were interviewing Chuck Dixon, we were talking about the end of the whole Nightfall, which was the big battle between Bruce and Jean-Paul, and how Bruce defeated him. And Chuck Dixon gave some comment like, oh, that was such a Denny O'Neil ending, like such a Denny O'Neil story, you know? And when I was a kid reading through these, I never thought about Dixon or O'Neil or Grant or, you know, any of these guys. And now as I'm reading them, I can kind of see like, oh yeah, this is a kind of a Denny O'Neil story. It's kind of more of a Chuck Dixon story. Whose idea do you think it was for the writers to come up with this whole like Alfred's going to fake out Nightwing with Tim's death kind of thing? Like, do you think that was Dixon, or do you think that was O'Neil, or who do you think that was? Because it happened in the O'Neil and the Dixon books.
I gotta almost think that's a Denny idea, because
or they're just like, we need something to. Well, it's just like 3-act structure was like, we need a cliffhanger, and there really isn't a good one, and so we'll just have him. I killed Robin once. I'm gonna make people think I killed him again.
Yeah.
Well, I even think it's funny in the Robin book, Nightwing ends up throwing the cure at Alfred's head. Was that like,
oh my gosh,
a little sublime? Like, this is Dixon throwing a piece of paper at O'Neil going, I can't believe you made me have to write this thing. What a D-bag thing to do.
It's literally when the story starts, like Alfred might as well just been like, psych.
Nanner. Well, maybe this is the best way to, unless you guys have anything else for Azrael.
Oh, one quick thing, too. It's kind of interesting. At the very end, the last page, Dick is like, this is where I had to like check myself and like, oh, you're reading too into it. Because Nightwing comes down and he's like, Alfred, good news. And I think he says it twice. But he calls, instead of calling him Tim, he calls him Robin. He says, we'll have Robin on his feet in no time. Hey, where is Robin? And I thought, oh, wow, that's kind of like so interesting that he calls him Robin and not Tim. And since Dick, you know, was Robin, now he's like acknowledging that Tim is now Robin, referring to it. And I'm thinking all this stuff, and I realized like, oh no, he probably just called him Robin because an Azrael reader wouldn't know who was supposed to be in that empty bed. Like, you know,
right.
Like, I'm like, yeah, it's just because then as soon as you open up Robin, he starts calling him Tim. So it's like, oh, okay, I'm reading a little bit too much into this, you know. So yeah,
I liked where you're going until you said that. Then I was probably like, oh yeah, that probably is true because they don't make mention. Do they say Tim at all? Because I think.
On page 3, they show him.
I think,
yeah, he does. He calls him Master Tim. Yeah. I won't lie to you, Master Tim. You're gonna die. Yeah,
yeah, because I think Alfred's giving him Bruce the play-by-play of what's going on at one point.
You know, if you were like dying of the clench and having these like fever hallucinations, the Batcave would probably be like the worst place to be with like bats flying around, a giant dinosaur, a big Joker card face in there. Like, you know, I'm hallucinating. I'm seeing a dinosaur. No, that's real. Bruce put that down here for some reason. Yeah,
it's the
giant penny. The penny. No, that's real. That's
to scare you back into your dreams.
Yeah.
Well, let's get right to the last book for today. This is going to be Robin 28 and part 11, as I'm calling it, the epilogue, Bitter Dregs. And the synopsis for this one is really short. And Nightwing races to the Batcave with the cure for the clench, but Alfred tells him that it's too late for Robin. However, he sees Batman and a cured Tim. Nightwing realizes Alfred was only bluffing. Meanwhile, the state governor was sworn in, the newly elected mayor, Marion Grage, if I'm saying that right, ahead of schedule. She has re-enlisted James Gordon as police commissioner. Robin heads back home and takes a detour to deal with the gang who refuses to let the cure into their area, teaming up once again with Catwoman. When he returns home, his family are relieved to see him again, and Ariana is there, whom Tim is particularly surprised to see. What I really liked about this, and I think the Robin book tends to do this, because at the end of the month, the Robin book was always the last book for that month. So sometimes the Robin book, if it's not the first book in the story of a major crossover, depending on when they start it, it's in the early part of it, and it usually ends up closing it. I believe, if memory serves me right, Robin closes Legacy, closes Cataclysm, and No Man's Land. So this is one of those that
Robin also had the aftermath of Night's End.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was also the aftermath of Night's End, too. Completely forgot about that one. So this is one of those that the first few pages of this is just catching you up to speed of like, all right, we got a new mayor, Commissioner Gordon is back, and you can continue to read the Robin book and just go right on with the Robin continuity. And as far as the trade goes, the next two stories are Robin stories before it catches back up with the Dead Man quasi tie-in to what was going on in Contagion as well, which I thought it was, because the next story is a Maxi Zeus story that really has nothing to do with Contagion at all, other than a couple little lines of dialogue as Tim's reacclimated to everything. So I really liked this story. I think out of the two previous, I really liked the Azrael story, but this one kind of gets our feet right back on the ground, and Tim has that line, Nightwing has the line to Tim of, hey, maybe set this one out. He's going to go with Batman. And I like that Dixon kind of forces Tim right back into the action, which he would kind of have to, being his own book. But seeing like Tim's probably had a few hours to recuperate before he's putting on the Robin costume. And Dixon doesn't write him as being, all right, he's a superhero again. He's having to deal with, hey, I've probably spent, who knows how much time, 3 or 4 weeks on the verge of death. And now he's still trying to battle, one of the gangs and having Catwoman save him. So what'd you guys think of Robin working together with Catwoman again so soon, and how Dixon wrote Tim in this? Let's start with Ryan on this one.
I thought it was cool because we've seen Tim work with Catwoman before, so it's fun to kind of reprise that and have him acknowledge that, I thought. The other thing is that it does seem like Dixon does a good job of not making Tim... He always finds a good a way to tap into the emotional core of Tim as Robin, and that's part of what his whole story in this issue is about, is he literally just got the cure from this crazy virus, and then 5 seconds later he's like, well, I gotta be Robin, I gotta do this, and then he gets out, but then he's literally too tired to go on, and he's just sitting there on the rooftop, and he's like, I've got to do this, but I really need to just sit down for 5 minutes, and that's, you don't see that too often in superhero books like this, where the hero's just like, damn it, I've got to sit down. So I thought that was really cool that they can take a beat and take a moment for stuff like that, and to see a little bit of his good nature rub off on Catwoman, that's fun. And then I really like the way that the status quo, gets reestablished, and that's really something that I like reading in some of these epilogue type issues, is that the story is pretty much wrapped up, but they can kind of reset things at the end to get you ready for the next story. And seeing Gordon back in action is definitely something that I think people were ready to see for quite a while at this point.
Yes, I think it's been, a 2-year gap since Gordon has been commissioner of the police department. So, yeah, that was good to see. Terrence.
Man, Rob, I'm gonna have to kick you off the podcast.
I haven't been kicked off in a long time. I've earned this one, apparently.
This is your last podcast. Ryan had just complimented you as it was like our thing to do to go over the cover of each book.
And
analyze the cover. And you just skip the cover and you jump like right until like the end of the book when there's a team up with Catwoman. Holy cow!
I did.
I'm going to tell you about this cover that it is
should be a really 3D poster.
Yeah, Rob has totally destroyed the fluidity of this podcast by making us go all over. The cover's good.
Unless I edit it.
No. Yeah. The cover is good. It ties in well for the Contagion storyline, but it's not one that I'd want hanging on my wall as a poster. You know, like Robin dying of the plague. But did you guys ever watch the show? It was my favorite show for a long time, Arrested Development.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they did a bit with the doctor on it who would always like say stuff like, "Oh, there's nothing we can do for him now," you know, because he's already cured. Like that's how the gag goes. Like he does that a few times. Like he appears dead. You know, like what? He just appeared dead. He had blue paint on him. He looked kind of dead. You know, remember the guy I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mrs. Funke.
Oh, this guy again.
How is he, doctor? It looks like he's dead.
Oh my God!
Oh, little guy. The tears aren't coming. The tears just aren't coming. Okay. Just to be clear, it looks like he's dead or he is dead? It just looks like he's dead. He's got, like, blue paint on him or something. But he's going to be fine. What is wrong with you?
Doctor!
I'll let you celebrate privately.
Hey, we want this cunt!
Again, what Ryan said, that Dixon always finds that good balance with Tim, but he also finds a really good balance with Catwoman, where she'll do some good, she'll do some evil. She kind of has that, she lives in that gray area where Batman is so black and white, and he does a really good job with both of them balancing that. And what I like about it is you can kind of see in this that Catwoman really respects Robin, right? Robin earns Catwoman's like respect, and not in like a cheesy kind of way, like just kind of subtly she's like impressed with the kid, like especially when she said, you know, what's wrong with you? And he's like, I had the clench, and she's like, holy cow, you know. And then I wanted to ask you something about that on page 19, which I don't know if you guys in the trades have it numbered. It's the panel is where Robin says it was the clench, and she says, my God, says, but I've got the cure, I'm just weak. And then the next panel shows Robin, and in the domino mask, he's got like blue pupils. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if that was done for effect, or you think that was a miscoloring, and I was wondering if they fixed it in the trades, or do you think that was supposed to be like that?
It's in my trade. I don't know how Ryan's reading this, but I think it's probably done more for effect, so you can really see like he's directly looking at her. So I noticed that too, because traditionally you don't see it. The superheroes that are wearing masks, very few of them, you don't see their eyes, like, you know, Hal Jordan and Kyle Rayner, you don't see their eyeballs, you see the, you know, slits in the white part of the mask. So yeah, I think that's probably deliberate. Every now and then some artists may draw Batman with pupils just so you can get more facial expression out of it. But yeah, Ryan, how are you reading this?
I was going to say, didn't Neil Adams or somebody tell us a story about that once? Either he did it in a story and he got yelled at, or he yelled at somebody for doing it. I can't remember. It was one of those two things. I'm reading it digitally on DC Universe because right now, if you go to DC Universe, they have the storylines tab, and wouldn't you know, Contagion is like the number one new to DC Universe storyline. So it's right there at the top.
You know, a little sidebar with that. Of course, everybody's on Facebook and Twitter. I have seen more posts I'm in a Batman statue collectors group. Like, I don't have, you know, the money to have these Prime 1 statues. I'll see people have like 15, you know, statues that are like $1,000 of each. And I'm like, what job do you have? But people are always posting, here's what I'm reading today. And probably over the last couple weeks, I've seen people going, hey, I hear about this Contagion story, so I'm going to read this. And so that's really kind of permeating just through the Bat family, you know, pages and stuff like that. So I hadn't even thought about DC Universe, so that doesn't surprise me that it's not on right now, that somebody at DC was like, we had this virus story, we'll put that up there.
To answer the question, yeah, it's the same on the DC Universe version with the blue pupils.
I was flipping through the pages here, getting to the back, which we don't see this too often. We don't see the Redbird not in the Redbird state as more as the Coop, where Tim's pulling up to the house and he's seeing his dad and hot trainer Dana that his dad's gonna marry. But you don't really see the Redbird in his normal, like, hey, this is Tim's sports car he's driving around. So I thought that was kind of cool to see. Having that through line throughout this, when Tim is first sick and then when he's, on death's door, where he's really wanting to make it a point to tell my dad, or it's really on his mind and he has the hallucination of his dad's okay with him being Robin and Ariana's okay with him being Robin. And now, like, real life is catching back up with him and people are wondering, well, where have you been? What's going on? And now Tim's having to make up his normal excuses to get back in his real life again. That I thought that was kind of cool, where Dixon is writing that inner monologue for Tim, that the thing that he wants to do isn't the thing that he can actually do. He's having to lie to his dad again and is excited to see his girlfriend. And there's another little cliffhanger for Ariana when we first Tim sees her, which we'll finally see her in 28 or 29. But what'd you think of Dixon, like, putting Tim back into his vices is the wrong word, but his status quo again? Status quo, like you said, Ryan, sometimes things get changed. Like, all right, Gordon's back again as commissioner, but as far as Tim's life is, it's business as usual. Terence.
I didn't really think too much about that, honestly, when I was reading the issue. I was kind of wondering what the next issue would be about, where it leads here, and it does seem like they're getting more serious in Ariana. What I did think about, and Rob, you're not going to like this, but
I'm going to kick you off the podcast.
Yeah, insert a promo here. Your other podcast, Everybody Loves Young Justice, including the cakes, especially the Young Justice cakes. How the modern 2019-2020 telling of Drake doesn't have any of this. Like, it doesn't have, Brian Michael Bendis has just completely ignored this whole side of Tim Drake of, having to balance, his family, which we've gone back and forth. I'm not sure if his parents are alive and in witness protection, or if they're alive, but I think they're alive or something. And, this just struggling with the girlfriend and everything, like, that's just gone. Like, that's just absent from that series. So that's what I thought about with it.
Well, that's hard, one of those when you got a team up book like a Justice League or a Teen Titans.
Yeah, you're an apologist. You're an apologist. I'm gonna call you on that. Here's why, because I thought of that too, and what I thought was, all he had to do was just, like, in one panel, look over to Impulse and say, like, man, I wish I could call my dad in this, whatever weird alternate universe thing was. Like, I get it that you can't spend 10 pages on Tim Drake and his dad, but he could have had a little bit. I could have said, "Oh, I hope my dad's not worried about me," or something like that.
That's actually where I was headed to, like, because.
No, you weren't. I just put that idea in your head. Don't take my credit.
So anyway, Ryan, what I was going to say was, that I think because of that, when you've got, in this time frame, you could have Tim in Batman and have him in Detective, have him in his own book and Young Justice and, all these other things. I could get why the Young Justice book in 1998 doesn't have to spend a lot of time going, gee, Ariana wants me to call her again. I can't even hang out with Stephanie. But in 2020, when that is the only vehicle for any of those characters, I want a little bit more character development in those stories. Like, in some of them lately, they're constantly just bouncing around the cosmos, and it's just, they're going from point A to point B. I'm like, can't we go from point A to C and spend a little bit more time in B? Like, give us some filler there. Like, I agree with you totally. Like, give me a panel or two of Tim going, gee, I haven't seen my parents in forever. Like, I'm going to hack the U.S. government and talk to them in witness protection or something like that. So, like, I'm on that side of it. I get when a character's got 12 titles, you're like, we don't have to constantly make mention of all these other things, but I think that's why I like this era so much, that you can have all these other things going on. You can get all those character personalities, but when a character's only got one book and there are multiple characters in that, I think you've got to spend at least a couple issues here and there doing it. So I think that's why, again, we keep bringing Chuck Dixon's name up. Even 3 books that Dixon wrote in Contagion, he had different characters. I think we said it in episode part 1 of this, that the Catwoman book felt very much like an Azrael or a Robin book, that Dixon really didn't care who the character book it was. Like, this is the story that needs to be told at this point. So if we get more Tim Drake in Catwoman 25, well, then so be it. So there's my long-winded answer.
Yeah, and if I sound like a jerk, it's probably because and I was just teasing you there, Rob. But, you know, like, I'll listen to stuff, and then I'll start talking like the people I listen to. Like, I'll listen to the Kevin Smith podcast for a while, and then I'll start talking to my wife, and I'll just say, like, foul-mouth, like, profanity stuff. She's like, what is with you? I'm like, I don't know. So I've been...
a podcast sponge.
Yeah, since I've been on stay-at-home orders here and not working and just at home, I've been rewatching The Office. So I was afraid, like, I'm going to sound like Michael Scott this whole podcast, and here I am, like, that's what Ryan said and all this stuff. So yeah, so
right now I'm just looking at the camera like Jim, like.
Yeah,
an audio medium, it just doesn't work really well. Michael,
yeah.
In this case, Ryan. That was your cue, right?
Oh,
yeah.
I haven't watched
Ryan
that
the
show.
Fire Guy. Yeah.
Means.
Oh, okay. There's a character on it named Ryan. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So I mean, so what do you have for Robin here, closing this? This book?
You know, we kind of poo-pooed the shock, goofy ending of the last couple issues that leads into this one, but I think the end of this one is even worse. This was so, like, out of left field. Terence was talking about, like, well, I wanted to see where this goes. I did. I was like, okay, let me find the next issue on DC Universe and figure out what this is. And I can spoil it just really fast.
No. We're eventually going to talk about this, so this will be a preview.
The giant surprise is, because I was like, what is this? I'm like, Ariana surprised? I was like, what? Why would he be so surprised? I was like, he's surprised. The dad, and Dana or whatever, they're like, whatever. And Miss McIlvaine is not pleased at all for some reason. I'm like, okay, so something McIlvaine doesn't like. What has she done? What is happening? Why is he so surprised? And so you read the next issue, and she's changed her hair color. I'm like, okay, that's the big shock into the issue. She changed her hair color.
Oh, and that's why on page 8 she's got a towel around her head, right? Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
See, they were
She had
telegraphing
just dyed it.
If you look really
close, you can clearly see that she's got a blonde strand of hair hanging out from underneath her towel.
Yeah, that's so funny. And what's funny about her changing it, it's that we even talked about the impetus for her doing this is apparently when Tim looked at the blonde-haired girl at Stephanie at the funeral a couple issues ago, and she got super pissed at him, and they had this fight. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a dumb fight. Or like a dumb thing that Ariana is like focused on or whatever. Like, she keeps that with her through this whole Contagion thing. And it's like, I'm going to dye my hair blonde because Tim was looking at a blonde haired girl for like 3 seconds, like a few issues ago at a funeral. Ooh, weird.
Yeah. That is the first thing I thought of, like, wow, chicks be crazy, man.
I just thought it was so interesting because we literally brought that up, like, man, that's such a fleeting thing to get upset about, and that was months ago, and here it is coming back into for some reason coming back into play in the next issue.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I could see her supply list to survive the virus. Like, we need toilet paper, bottled water, and some hair dye, please. Yeah.
That was funny because I was telling you guys in our group text, that, hey, I think Terence had said, hey, some of the numbers were wrong on the books. Are they that way in the trade? And I had said, we, went out to Walmart to do, the curbside pickup. And, you go online and order all your groceries, and you check the box that says, can we make substitutions? And some of the things that they substitute, you're like, all right, I wanted pizza, but you gave me pizza sauce. Like, is that really a substitution? You go, all right, we wanted Diet Cherry Pepsi, and they gave us Diet Pepsi. And you're like, all right, well, we wanted a gallon of milk. We didn't have a gallon of milk. We had 2 half gallons. Well, we'll take that. Oh, like, come on. So this is one of those things, like, looking at it going, all right, this is essential. We asked for Little Debbie's, and okay, that wasn't yeah, and we wanted Drake cakes, and they gave us Little Debbie's. Was this essential that she needed her blonde hair dye? Where she like, you don't understand. My boyfriend is obsessed with this blonde chick. I need to be blonde. This is essential, mom and dad, or aunt and uncle. So like that little bit I thought was kind of funny. Like, I wouldn't even have thought about, people that are working in the stores and doing the Lord's work right now, throwing Kevin Smith out there since Terence just mentioned him. Like, people on the front lines and doing this stuff, and seeing people go to Walmart with bags over their heads because they don't have masks. And you're like, this just clearly shows that you should not be out doing things. This is not essential.
First, the absolute nitpicking section of the podcast. Just out of curiosity, on your guys' copy, I have the floppy from when it originally came out. On the opening page where Nightwing is all shocked and it gives who wrote it, is the E in Mike Wieringo's name missing on yours? Or is that like a printing error? I was just wondering if that was like a smudge on my book. It says Mike W. Ringo on mine.
This just says, this is the I is in there. Wieringo.
Oh, it's an I? Okay, see, my I is missing. But I don't know if that might just... I was wondering if that was like my printing messed up, or they fixed that later or something.
I think they did fix it.
Yeah. And then just a little history trivia here. Gordon, when he comes back, and then he says, we've got Jim Gordon to kick around again, that's a... cool thing Chuck Dixon threw in there. That's from Richard Nixon. In 1962, Richard Nixon, he ran for president in 1960 and lost to Kennedy, and then he ran for governor of California in 1962 and lost to Jerry Brown. And so Nixon was like, that's it, I'm quitting politics, I'm done. And he gave this like grumpy speech where it's like, you don't have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore. And then, of course, 6 years later, he came back and won the presidency. But I think that's kind of cool that Chuck Dixon kind of threw that little that nod in there. And then the thing, I wanted to talk about this, Rob, I even like threw it out a little bit, the creepy scene on page 13 with the blue coloring and the kid and the father in shadow.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He's like, but he's like, and he says some stuff to his dad about why aren't they bringing the medicine? And he says, but if they don't get here soon and then his dad's like, it's in God's hands, son. It's been in his hands all along. And the boy says, but you and Mama and Jody are good people. What did we do wrong? And his face is all in shadow, and you see the dead bodies behind him and the ceiling fan. And he says, we moved to this wicked city. Like, oh my gosh, man. That is just... And if you showed me the script of that, I would say, Ringo, he could never pull that off. His art is more like impulse and fun and Robin and big feet and all this. But, man... he pulls it off. He does this really well. He draws an amazing Catwoman. She doesn't look goofy and silly with like giant feet like Impulse or something. Like, she's really proportional and looks gorgeous. And that scene is just, man, if that was a horror movie, like I said, I'd drop my popcorn and walk right out right there. I'm done.
Yeah, I liked that page. This would have been a nice little beat to see extended a little bit more. Good pull. I forgot that you had mentioned there was something else you had. You got anything else there, Ryan?
No, I mean, I just think that I think in traditional Dixon crossover fashion, sometimes like these giant stories, the way that they don't end the way you expect them to end, but they're still interesting nonetheless. And I was happy to see some of the status quo stuff kind of get restored, because I like the status quo quite a bit. And I'm just and I know the next few issues in the run are kind of fun. So I'm excited to get back into those before the next ones come, before the next big crossovers come. Because I keep talking about this, but I'm really excited to get to Legacy whenever we get to that.
Yeah, same here.
Can I do a little preview for the next Robin Everyone Loves the Drake podcast here?
Go for it.
Because, well, you could fill in maybe some of the gaps here of what's going on, because I'm not really sure. But we're going to jump ahead in time and connect to some other podcasts. And for that, you said read Robin 144, and then you said read Robin 140.
145.
145?
Yep. And
okay.
if you're like me, you probably, if you're following along with us at home, this is a considerable jump to, we're in 1996 right now. We got an 80th anniversary show that'll slip in. But after that, we're going to jump to 2006, I believe, if I got my math right, to those Robin issues. So I actually started reading at 139 to 145, just so I had a little bit of context. We are going to be part of J.L. May, and a lot of podcasters. Michael Bailey is spearheading this one with Shag Matthews for, they're going to be covering Infinite Crisis. So all the surrounding podcasts that are in this podcasting community, we're going to cover the events that led up to the countdown to Infinite Crisis. So that way we can get a cross-section of what were all these heroes doing right before the crisis started. Because once the crisis is over, the landscape of DC Comics vastly changes for a lot of these characters. So we will be talking about the events that lead up to this and those. And it's part of the OMAC story that was going on, and Robin is hanging around some soldiers. So you have that to look forward to coming up. So it was one of those I had to do a little bit of extra reading to go, there's some other friends that Tim has. Like, we haven't even got to this on the show. So I don't know about Terence, but I was taking some notes going, I don't understand this. So let me go back an issue. And let me go back an issue. I went back 5 issues so we could review 2 issues.
Yeah, because when you guys were talking and stuff, I was digging through the long box to see if I had any of them. And I actually have 143 and 144 that I got from like a dollar bin sometime and never read them because I was not reading comics at this time. And I was flipping through and trying to read 143 as we were recording, and I don't have a clue as to anybody in this. And then 144, I don't know who any of these people are. All right, Robin the Boy Wonder, I know him. Ragman, I know Ragman. Blue Devil, I know Blue Devil. The Veteran, you mentioned him before, never heard of him before. Captain Johnny Cloud, no idea. Lieutenant Lisa Von Hammer, and Sergeant Tommy Tinker, the Clockwork Commando. So I've got a lot of homework to do. I've got 143, 144, 150 and 151. So I've got. I'm gonna have to buy some digital or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So to conclude Contagion, we were talking about the necessities. Like toilet paper now is a necessity, and you go to get toilet paper and you can't find any. And you're like, can I use this? Can I use the leaves that are outside? All these things that we want to have necessity. Is Contagion considered a necessity if you're listening to the Batman Book Club by Ryan Lauer? If you're not listening to that podcast, a little plug for his show. They have 3 episodes now, and I think I know the guest on the 4th episode. Who is that? Well, that's right, it's me. Is this a necessity? Is this essential in your Batman reading? And what did you guys think of Contagion now that it has concluded? So let's start with Ryan on this one.
I don't think it's essential, but it is definitely worthy of your attention and a worthy read, especially as a building block for other stories, because you kind of got to start with Contagion, because Contagion leads into Legacy, and Legacy leads into No Man's Land, and isn't there something else?
You have Cataclysm.
Yeah, that leads into all that. Yeah, so it's all part of that ongoing story. You can hit the highlights without having to read the regular issues in between. So yeah, it's just another good solid crossover, and it's fun to go back through these issues, because just the titles it goes through, you just say them out loud, and you're of that era. You're like Shadow of the Bat, and Dixon Detective Comics, and Robin, and Catwoman, and Azrael. It's like It's cool. Oh, and the Batman Chronicles. I mean, it's cool that there is a crossover like this that goes across so many titles of that era. So yeah, I wouldn't call it like, oh, it's a top 5 Mount Rushmore Batman story or whatever, but it's definitely fun and it's interesting compared to some other things because it is Batman punching a virus or not punching a virus, right? And just like we've been saying, it's eerie similarities to the what we're dealing with today. Just is keeping it relevant.
Terrence,
the odd thing about this kind of crossover was it didn't really change anything or change any of the status quo. Where like Nightfall, put Jean Paul as Batman, and those things end up going back to how they were. But this, that you can't look at anything and say, oh, well, that Contagion happened and then, this guy was Robin, or Nightwing changed his costume, or, even Catwoman, like, ditches that white costume, by the end of it. And even it returned some things, putting Commissioner Gordon, or James Gordon, back as commissioner, I should say. From that, it's almost like like in a video game, like a side mission, or like the downloadable stuff. It's a great read. It's fun to read. It's awesome. But if you didn't read this, you wouldn't have a huge like gaping hole in your Batman knowledge or your 90s Batman trivia. You'd still be okay, except you wouldn't know that Tim Drake was a huge fan of the Jerky Boys. That would just be crushing. Yeah,
that's right. It's those little things that I would love to pick Dixon's brain sometime. Just the oddball trivia. I have a list going. I don't think I've told the two of you guys this. I have a running list going of all like the Dixon-isms that he uses. All right, here's all the made up soda names and different restaurants.
Oh, Shaughnessy's. Yeah.
To kind of map out like Sanyo TV instead of Sony, and all that type of stuff. And
did he come up with Big Belly Burger and the Arrowverse steal that, or was that an Arrowverse? When I first heard that on Arrow, I thought I think that's from a Chuck Dixon book, but maybe not. Yeah.
I don't remember on that one.
That's not on your list?
No, it's not. No, it's not on my list. I've been keeping track of all these things, and this is just one of those little footnotes in the the Batman universe that, and maybe it's more relevant now, and people will find some enjoyment of it. I think maybe even calling this a gem, like, oh man, this is just a sleeper of a book. People read this. I don't even know if it's that, but it is a good footnote to read to get into something like No Man's Land, to look back at it at the end of No Man's Land, that you can connect all of those plot points and all these different horrible things that have happened in Gotham to this one moment right here. So if nothing else, I think it's just it's a fun read, and it's one of those that you're going, I love reading A Lonely Place of Dying. I'm going to read this again for the 90th time. Maybe check this one out, and check DC Universe. Like Ryan said, it's one of the top books right now.
Yeah,
I do think people will read this book differently after 2020 than pre-2020, and look at it just as we looked at some things differently after September 11th. Some stories and stuff I read before that, or movies I watched, and then when I watched stuff or read stuff after September 11th, 2001, I was kind of looking at it very differently. And this book, after everything we've gone through in 2020, we may look at it, and instead of just being like, oh yeah, this is fiction, Batman fighting a virus, look at it and be like, wow, this could have been real. We're glad, coronavirus wasn't as deadly as the clench and bleeding out of your eyes and stuff. But
right,
yeah, it'll definitely, I don't know, it'll definitely be different, that's for sure.
One of the last things that I want to say here, that I haven't said this too much. I know we're all dealing with the social distancing and staying at home, and for those people that maybe the place that you're working, you're not working at, and trying to figure things out, I hope this story finds you in a good way, and hopefully that we do get back to some realism very soon. Stay safe out there, be smart out there, and hopefully all this will be a distant memory, by the time we get to Christmas, that we can look back on this time. And I think these are going to be not just this, story we've been talking about over the course of this last month, but will this will go down as a moment for like 9/11, like where were you? And hey, remember when we had that 2 or 3 month gap where, you know, I got a chance to read a bunch of books and to get to try and take my mind off all the craziness out there. You know, find a book like this, find creative ways to hang out with family and friends through technology. And you know, the safer we can all play this, then the better it's going to be once we can all get in a room and get into a convention together. I was listening to some DC Daily stuff, listen to Scott Snyder talk about, he's like, I can't wait to get to that first convention when we can have people come up. He's like, it's going to be almost like a convention like no other. So those are the things that I look forward to.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I know this for a fact, we're going to appreciate, and I'm going to appreciate a lot of stuff that I was maybe taking for granted or not appreciating as much in the past. It's going to have a whole new level of enjoyment and appreciation once we can get back to normal and go to amusement parks and hang out in conventions and get your comics at the comic book store and all kinds of stuff, and get a haircut and just a million things that I just never thought about before. Yeah.
Well, on the behalf of Ryan and Terence, this is Rob telling you guys, stay safe out there. We're in this together, and we will see you guys on the next episode of Robin and Everyone Loves a Drake here on the BatmanUniverse.net. Take care, everybody. Bye. Thanks for listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake podcast. This has been brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net. Tim Drake, Robin, and all Batman-related characters are under copyright of DC Comics. This podcast is solely for entertainment purposes, so no infringement is intended by this show. The show is not a good revenue stream. Actually, there's not a stream at all. All music and sound clips are under copyright by their respected copyright holders. So there should be no need to send the Penguins lawyers after us for ill-gotten gains because there are none. You can get a hold of the show a few different ways. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. You can also email in at robineltdpodcast@yahoo.com. Our Facebook page can be found at www.facebook.com/everyonelovesthedrake. And as always, you can message directly over at the BatmanUniverse.net. So email, tweet, or message us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll read your comments or responses on the show. The show you're listening to can be found a few different ways through iTunes and Windows Media, also over at our host, TBU. Leave us a review on iTunes if you listen there. It'll help spread the word of the show. Make sure you head over to the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. Thanks for listening to the show and hearing why everyone loves the Drake. We'll see you in a few